All right, hello, warriors, and welcome to Warrior Goddess Wednesday. Welcome to the first one of the Gregorian calendar new year. We all know the calendar is a psyop, but that's okay. We will use it as one way to mark our way through time space. So, welcome to the show. I'm Rachel Z. I am your host for this evening's live stream where we're going to be going over wife goddess energy. So, just to fill you in on the whole idea of this particular show, the rules of engagement here, Wednesday, also known as Woden's Day. I was born on a Wednesday as well, and in spite of people saying Wednesday's child is full of woe, I am not full of woe, I am full of joy, and this is not always the case. That was something that was worked upon. But every Wednesday in the evening, we're going to go over different goddesses around the world and different storylines that have to do with these goddesses from a neuro-linguistic astrology lens. Now, what does that really mean? Neuro-linguistic astrology is my specific way of how I look at astrology. So if you're interested in a reading from me, I do them on Thursdays and Fridays via Zoom, and you can book that in the description. I will add a link below if you want to do that. But back to what my definition of neurolinguistic astrology is. So neurolinguistic comes from the practice of NLP, so neurolinguistic program, the idea that the words that you say both internally and externally matter, the fact that the words that we use are a type of map, and the map is not the territory, they are just markers. That's how we as creator beings are able to communicate our inner universe and our inner world to each other is via that. And it doesn't we have symbols and stories that are common in our human psyche, and so when we have practices like astrology and myths and all of these other things, even being a personal trainer, how that is involved in the storytelling of your body, the words that you say to yourself matter internally as well. I used to have a saying, I still do have this saying, training girls, that your body hears everything that your mind says. So it's incredibly important, I think, to empower yourself with stories that provide inspiration, courage, a love story. Also, like, it's a great way to alchemize more uncomfortable emotions. Some movies are hard to watch, but in watching them, you can practice things like compassion and empathy and being able to see the side of a situation from like a villain's point of view, or a hero that has had to go through this whole redemption arc, and you come along with that journey without you having to go through it personally yourself. You yourself in your own psyche have done that, and there is value in that, right? And that's why movies are so magical and why they are so important to culture building. So Warrior Goddess Wednesday, every Wednesday we're going to go over a theme. The last Wednesday we went over I missed last Wednesday because I think it was like holidays and things were crazy, and solstice, but prior to that I did Freya and the other goddesses of beauty, love, and war, and there is some overlap with those goddesses and the goddesses that we're going to be reviewing tonight, the wife goddesses. And before that, I did all of the moon goddesses of the world. Now, the moon does tend to be a female goddess, but in Japanese culture, and that's what I was reviewing last night, so if you want to catch that live stream about dragon stories, in Japanese culture, the sun is a goddess and the moon is a god. And so that is something we will touch upon when we go over Isis. And she's going to be the first one that we go over. But before that, we're going to go into wifiness and what it means to be a wife. So a personal story of mine, I've been a wife for 9 years now. I've been with my husband Kevin for a total of 14 years, I believe, but we've been married for 9, and being a wife and what that role is, and I suppose it's outdated and it's old-fashioned to say that a goal of a lifetime of being a woman is to be a wife, but it is a very important role, and the ancients and ancient mythologies knew that as well, because when we think of goddesses, when we think of that energy, we as human beings are assigning a personified, I guess, idea and frame around it so that we can talk about ineffable themes and ineffable ideas in a way that is coherent, that we can understand each other. But that being said, there is room for variation in your own spin on things as it comes to how you yourself are interfacing with whatever the story is coming towards you. So we're going to start with the basis of wife energy. And it's funny because when I did a search, let's just go into that without further ado. I did enough preamble of the show. Oh, and if you would like to support the show, you can grab us a mushy at Buy Us a Coffee, but they let me pick whatever I would like as a gift. So you can buy us a coffee/mushy to support the show. We're going to go into wife goddess energy and what that means. And I did a search for wife goddesses, and interestingly enough, the first one that pops up is Hera. And I said this last night, Hera's not my favorite goddess. If you watch the Disney movie Hercules, Hera's also like the main is she the antagonist in that? I have to double check, but she's usually the antagonist. And in Hercules, the legendary journeys with Kevin Sorbo, Hera's definitely not. Hercules is his fan, but as I also stated last night, Zeus is kind of like all over the place, so Hera gets very upset. But let's go into Hera herself. And in my book, The Dragon Warriors Battle for Mount Olympus, Hera is one of the goddesses who gets taken over by Queen Watiko, the evil queen, ex de facto dragon warrior who kills her. I'm not going to ruin the story, but we get Hera back, but she gives into her lesser. It's a lesson for all of us as wives. There are different types of wife goddesses you could embody, and Shakti actually does a good job of the different energies of what that is. But let's go into Hera herself. Oh yes, and Hera is also known as Juno. So in astrology, when you're talking about the asteroid Juno, that is also the Hera energy. So maternal mother energy and wife energy are very related, but they're not the same. They're differing. So Hera in ancient Greek religion is a daughter of the Titans Cronus and Rhea. It's funny because, for example, Atlas and Prometheus are both Titans, and Kronos and Rhea, who are the mother and father of the pantheon of the Greek gods. Why aren't the gods Titans? Someone answer me that. Is it because, I don't know, they endowed themselves as not being that? They've created their own thing? Someone let me know about that. The Romans identified her with their own Juno, as I said. Hera was worshipped throughout the Greek world and played an important part in Greek literature, appearing most frequently as the jealous and rancorous wife of Zeus and pursuing with vindictive hatred the heroines who were beloved by him. She also famously drove Hercules mad, which caused him to kill his wife and children. They never do that in the movies. It's kind of a really somber thing to have happened to Hercules. So he goes crazy and he kills. They actually did that in the show with Hercules. I remember that. Leading to the 12 labors. So he does the 12 labors to atone for that. And from early times, Hera is known to be the real wife of Zeus and superseded Dione, who shared with him his ancient oracle at Dodona in Epirus. So I'm going to get into Zeus's other wives and other partners, but let's talk about Hera a bit more. In general, Hera was worshipped in two main capacities: as a consort of Zeus and the queen of heaven, and as a goddess of marriage and the life of women. And so the second sphere made her the protectress of women in childbirth. And she bore the title of Eleithia, the birth goddess, at Argos and Athens. So this goes into how goddesses have many aspects depending on how they're venerated and worshipped. And so at Argos and Samos, Hera is even more than queen of heaven and marriage goddess. She was the patron of those cities, which gave her a position corresponding to that of Athena at Athens. So being a patron of that. And if we even talk about the Iliad, I believe it was Hera and, oh my goodness, because Athena favored Achilles, and she's who gifted him with that armor. But it was also a war against the gods in addition to their champions that are there enacting that, right? And that's kind of similar to here, how you can kind of think of even how we interpret our birth chart, that these luminaries and these essences are playing out a grand drama within us as a stage, as the places of that all happening, and how that all plays out. It's kind of like up to us and the decisions that we make, which stories end up coming to fruition. So that is Hera. So like there's her vindictive side, but also she's a protectoress, right? I'm going to go into here the wives of Zeus, because this one, look at this little picture, goes into the fact that like Zeus is also kind of sowing his seed. He sits upon, so I'm not going to go into too much of Zeus. The Zeus is worth a whole other look. Okay, so the 7 immortal wives of Zeus. So the wives of Zeus were as follows. 7's an interesting number too. Hera, I'm going to see what they say about Hera. Yeah, that's how I kind of picture Hera, really. The principal wife, and she's like head wife and the queen of heaven. So that's an interesting note. I like to keep track of where there are commonalities in the terminology of what things are called. So queen of heaven is also, Isis is also referred to as the queen of heaven. Sky goddesses are also kind of queen of heaven situations. So let's put a little note on that. And Hera was also an Olympian. She's part of the pantheon of 12 gods and goddesses. And she's Zeus's sister because she's also the daughter of both Kronos and Rhea. And legend says that Zeus first appeared to Hera as a bird, and she took the bird in, nursing it back to health and taking great care to keep it alive. And eventually Zeus transformed into his divine form, revealing his true identity. He then seduced Hera, taking her as his wife. And out of all of Zeus's wives, Hera is considered the most important. She was an Olympian goddess of women, family, marriage, and childbirth. Her symbolism extended beyond her connection with Zeus, which makes her an important figure in the lives of ancient Greeks. And so, with Zeus, Hera actually gave birth to several children that are very important gods. And they had a total of 10 offspring. And the most famous include Ares. I know Ares is definitely the son of Zeus and Hera, and Hephaestus, the blacksmith of the gods, which is also sometimes attributed to Taurus. And Hebe, the goddess of youth. Hebe, I don't even know about this. That's a new one for me. So Hera has many illustrious stories written about her. Unfortunately, many of them revolve around Zeus's infidelity, and Hera is notorious for her jealousy, and she often directed her rage at Zeus's many lovers and illegitimate children. And despite her depiction as a matronly figure, she also came off as a vengeful goddess, torturing many who fell prey to Zeus's advances. Oh, I love Metis. Metis is awesome. Oh, let's go over them all, actually. So we'll go through them quickly, and then we'll go into Isis, Hathor, Shakti, and that it? Am I missing one of my girls? Let me just check. No, because Hera. I'm starting with Hera instead of ending with Hera because there's more of a flow to it that way, because it's a way to see how this is all connected. And so when you become a wife, you can choose what energy signature you want to embody. You don't have to go into Hera mode. I mean, unless it's warranted, I suppose, right? And that is a matter of opinion, I guess. So before Hera became his wife, Zeus fell in love with an Oceanid. I forget this. So every element. So this is like a different type of deity or god as opposed to the Olympians. The sun was Helios and the moon was Selene, and the winds were the four Anemoi. They also say that the winds are the four immortal horses. And the most essential element of all was water, which had many deities associated with it. And so, yes, you have the nymphs and the oceanids that are essences and elementals, but not necessarily gods. That's something to look into, the classifications of all that. Because as you know, like Kronos tried to eat all his kids, but Zeus managed to get away because I think Rhea gave him a rock instead, and then Zeus was raised by the nymphs. I think Dionysus was also. But anyways, Metis was the nymph daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. And she was supposed to be a personification of wisdom, deep thought, and prudence. And Metis purportedly helped Zeus save his brothers and sister, who Kronos swallowed. So, like Poseidon and Hera and Hades, they were all like in Kronos's belly, and Zeus had to get them out, and so that's Metis apparently helped. And she had a vision because she had prophecy, and I know like a lot of books, they talk about how prophecy is, double-edged sword. These visions are not always wanted. She was gifted the power of prophecy, and Metis saw that one of Zeus's sons would overthrow him as he had done to Kronos. And after consulting with Gaia and Uranus, Zeus swallowed Metis. And interestingly enough, swallowing his first wife gave Zeus the wisdom she held, which helped him become the ruler. And she was already pregnant, and this is how Athena was born, fully formed and ready for battle directly from Zeus's head. So that is very interesting. Okay, this is not the first woman that Zeus gets rid of because he's afraid that the son may overthrow him, just like he did to his own father. There's Themis. I think this is the one that No, Themis was the mother of the Fates. The Fates are a whole other thing, and also a reason why 3 is important. The past, present, and future. The maiden, married woman, which is what we're talking right now, and then the crone. I don't know about Euronome. She's another Oceanid and a Titan goddess, a beautiful mermaid. So she is supposed to be a mermaid goddess. It's interesting too because horses are associated with the sea as well. Demeter is supposed to be one of Zeus's wives. Oh, so she's also one of Zeus's sisters. I wonder, so not much is known about how, I didn't even know this was like a relationship between Zeus and Demeter transpired. I wonder if Zeus is Persephone's, probably Persephone's dad. Yeah, that's true. so Persephone is like the daughter of Zeus and Demeter. And yeah, so that whole myth is a whole other thing. It's interesting because in the Magicians, Persephone and Hades actually have a beautiful love story. And yeah, so she actually chooses, I think, Persephone, and that also, Persephone and the pomegranate and eating the pomegranate being the reason why she can't leave the underworld, goes back to that whole cautionary tale about like not eating food in the spirit realm. I am not even trying to say this name at this point. So she's a daughter, Titan goddess from, well, let's try, Mnemosyne, a Titan goddess born from Uranus and Gaia. And before she became a consort of Zeus, she was an elder Titan, Musai, who inspired music and the goddess of memory. That kind of, you can kind of see that in the name. I could use you sometimes. Forgetfulness, Kevin can too. Anyone who smokes weed could use a little more of you. So Zeus appeared to memory goddess as a mortal shepherd. He seduced her, sleeping with her for 9 consecutive days. And during that courtship, Zeus impregnated her with 9 children. And these were the 9 muses. Ah, of course, of course. So Zeus is also the father of the muses. Could you call all of these ladies his wives? I feel like these are just his consorts. Maybe that's why Hera got all jealous. But yes, each muse represented different attributes. I have a Substack article where I go over each of these ladies because I have Mozart in my book, and Mozart is very favored by the goddesses, even though he was dealt kind of a sad hand at the end of his life. But it's important here too to kind of note that you do have a goddess that deals with tragedy, and also here my girl Terpsichore, which is the goddess of dance. And if we go back to my little main screen here, I have a goddess. Oh my goodness. She's a Japanese goddess of dawn. And her story is that she enticed the sun goddess out of hiding from like being like stripping and showing a little bit of like, hey, but bringing mirth and joy and humor, and like she was like a go-go dancer, like dancer that brought the sun back. So really fun story. I'm working on a little music video that's kind of like the story of that, about the goddess of dawn dancing to bring the sun goddess out of hiding, to get her sister out to come dance and see that there are so many beautiful things in the world that the sun just makes better. Okay, so I think that's it. This just goes into the Oceanids. Let me just go to make sure that I get all the wives. Oh, Leto. Do you like Duke Leto from... Okay. The story of Leto is famous for depicting Hera's wrath. So, as I said before, I think it's a little bit of a misnomer to talk about these wives of Zeus's actual wives. You can have like Hera as like the head wife, and these are all of Zeus's other lovers. But in the spirit of wife goddess energy, and what does it mean to be a wife, to be the consort, to be the accompaniment, to be the partner of God energy? Because what is a god without a goddess, and what is a goddess without a god? It's about that alchemical marriage between the two. We also have this expressed within ourselves, our masculine and feminine selves as well. So to be a wife goddess energy to the male god within us too is important. A bit more complicated, but we'll get to that. Leto was one of several Titanides, the earth goddess daughters of Uranus and Gaia. Okay, so we gotta look at these guys, because the daughters of Uranus and Gaia, oh my goodness. If you're not familiar with Kronos cut off Uranus's... Oh my gosh, what's happening here? Oh no, I went... I made like an extra tab. Okay, anyways. So, according to the myth, Leto's beauty caught the attention of Zeus, and after seducing her, Leto became pregnant with Zeus's child. And upon discovering her pregnancy, Hera sought revenge. She forbade Leto from giving birth on any land. So it's crazy because Leto also represents motherhood and protection of the young, and then so does Hera, but she goes out of her way to like give Leto such a hard time by forbidding her from giving birth on any land or island and shunning her and pursuing her relentlessly. So Leto went from one place to the next in search of refuge. She found safety on the island of Delos, and some stories say that Poseidon raised the island, separating the seafloor and allowing Leto to give birth there on a technicality. So that's where you get the whole floating island situation. So because the island was floating, separating from the seafloor, it's technically a sea island that is lifted. So she was able to give birth there on a technicality. That is all the little things, like these little tricks in these stories. How you get around things is like the cunning nature of what I think is missing from heroism. And it's a heroic archetype, you know, the rogue, that idea, that's important. Leto is the mother of Apollo and Artemis, and Apollo's the sun, and Artemis is the moon, which lines up with a lot of the other cultural stories about how the sun and moon came to be. They technically do tend to be, like in Japanese culture, the left eye is the moon, and the right eye is the sun. Oh my gosh, I have to go back and double check that. Do not quote me on that, but it's all to say that from the main gods, or from the head gods, typically the sun and moon are children and related to each other like brother and sister. Although typically, like Apollo here, the male god is the sun and Artemis is the moon. And in Sailor Moon, Artemis is one of the cat's names as well. Just a little ode to the moon. They're also here too that other affairs that Zeus had. I'm not going to get into that, and maybe that's why. So like Maya and Zeus made Hermes. Helen of Troy is also supposed to be Zeus's daughter. That's why she was so beautiful. And that's a whole other story as well. The golden apples and the apples of Paris. So those are the 7 immortal wives of Zeus. Let's move away from Greek mythology for a bit. I'm going to close this so I don't get confused with all of the stories that we can go down. We're going to go into Isis. I am resurrecting my Goddess Storytime Serenade, my love story series, starting with Eros and Psyche first, and dressing up as Psyche and telling that. But I am also going to be doing a special on the Isis and Osiris love story, because it is the epic one. It is one of my favorites. It is about Isis like being the ultimate wife goddess and doing what she can to raise her beloved from the dead. And like, even though she goes through all of this hardship, she's able to do it. And so she is an ultimate goddess to beseech for compassion. There's a story having to do with her and her son Horus that I'm going to get into in just a second, which gets into the idea of compassion not always being great for you, but you have to do it anyways. So with Isis, she's one of the best known goddesses in the Egyptian pantheon, not to be confused with a terrorist organization. Isis was the granddaughter of Ra and the wife of Osiris, the mother of Horus. While she is best known as a powerful sorceress and a healer, she is also a fiercely protective mother and a loyal wife. Her acts of healing and compassion are renowned throughout the land, and those who threaten her loved ones do so at their own peril. That wife goddess energy. Isis is depicted as wearing a crown representing the hieroglyph for throne. So if you think about Isis, the name of Isis, it's like the throne goddess. She is the one who provides the adequate birthright for whomever is to the throne. You think Game of Thrones, right? The right to rule, the divine right to rule is endowed by Miss Isis. Like, it's a shame how many relics don't exist in Egypt anymore. They're instead in other museums. Even like Cleopatra's Needles, is the obelisks. One sits in Central Park and one in London. Just things like that. Just really interesting. And Isis was a goddess of contradictions. You can kind of say that about Hera too. Isis is another one that gets to be called the Queen of Heaven as well. She could be bloodthirsty and ruthless, but also compassionate and loyal, and known for acts of healing. But her grief can cause the death of innocence. I think that myself and my friend Arzi talked about this, like that magic and emotion with women, and this is why water is symbolic of like deep emotional waters. Scorpio is known as being very intense emotionally, because this grief, this pain it's like that energy can also cause destruction. It's just a part of our responsibilities as those who are going to be wielding power to do so in a benevolent way. Isis extorted her grandfather Ra so that her unborn son Horus could lay claim to the throne. But hey, I think that's fine, because all the stuff that Set did was that's, as I said, that story deserves a little bit more analysis and looking through. So later, when Horus was engaged in, I don't agree with this. She just helped Horus with, I'm not going to go into that. It's about the boat and like making sure it doesn't sink and all that kind of stuff. What I wanted to finish off with here because Isis deserves a whole segment, a whole show all just for her. I work with Isis a lot. I have an oracle deck, an Isis oracle deck, and she's also the captain of the Dragon Warriors. I had a big book of goddesses when I was very young, a big beautiful picture book, and from there they had like the big spread of an image of each goddess, and beside it everything about them. And oh my gosh, my makeup's running. There you go. But in that I chose her before all this stuff happened, just because she went through so much, and the story of how they took Osiris away from her and killed her beloved, and all just because of jealousy, right? It wasn't because anyone did anything, and then because of that she had to go through hell, but did it anyways and came out winning. I'm not going to spoil that story, and that was a very Cole's Notes version, not worth it, but please come back for any of those retellings. But Isis is usually depicted in human form, and sometimes carrying a sistrum, which is like an ancient percussion instrument. And the myths and imagery surrounding Isis and another goddess, Hathor, were sometimes conflated. So Hathor and Isis are typically sometimes seen as together, and Isis at times would bear cow horns and solar discs that are associated with Hathor. Now, okay, so she's the eldest sister and the fourth child. That doesn't make any sense if she has a younger anyways. But yes, Newt and Geb, which I talked about having a message from Newt before, they are the sky goddess. So I guess Queen of Heaven could also go towards Newt. And Geb is the earth. And so together they had all these siblings. And Nephthys actually helps her sister out, Isis, in retrieving Osiris and bringing him back from the dead. And Anubis was abandoned and Isis raised him. Oh, that I'm not going to get into that right away. I want to still have room to talk about the other goddesses that I haven't really touched on ever before in these conversations. So with that, let's go into Hathor. Hathor is known as the wife of Horus, and there is a story about how there was an opportunity for Isis to kill Set. And if you think about all the horrible things that Set had done to her, like killing Osiris and then tearing him apart and then her having to fast, anyways, all of that, she had an opportunity to kill him or get back at him or hurt him or in some sort of way, and she didn't do it because she is a forgiving, empathetic goddess and didn't do that. And this made Horus really angry, so he cut off her head, and in place she has a cow's head. So that is one story, and Hathor is very associated with cows, and cows are divine and sacred in Egyptian mythology. So this is where a lot of that symbolism conflates with each other and is intertwined with each other. And Hathor, in ancient Egyptian religion, is considered the goddess of sky, of women, fertility, and love. And Hathor's worship originated in early dynastic times, the 3rd millennium BCE. And if we remember from the Dragon Stories talk last night, this was when the star in Draco was actually the pole star. So that's interesting. The name Hathor means estate of Horus and may not actually be her original name. Her principal form was that of a cow, and she's strongly associated with motherhood. So Isis is more associated with being that wife goddess who enabled resurrection, who is the mother of Horus, but not necessarily childbirth itself. Let's see here. Hathor was closely, I shouldn't say that though, because it's all kind of intertwined. I think it's dependent on the relationship that you personally have with whichever goddess you choose to. So Hathor is closely connected with the sun god Re of Heliopolis, whose eye or daughter she is said to be. And at her cult center at Dandra in Upper Egypt, she is worshipped with Horus. And there are many cults of Hathor in many towns of Egypt, for she was the patroness of foreign parts and of many minerals won from the desert. In the Sinai turquoise mines, for example, she was called Lady of Turquoise. At Deir el-Bahari in the necropolis of Thebes, she became Lady of the West and patroness of the region of the dead. In the late period, the 1st millennium BCE, women aspired to be assimilated with Hathor in the next world, just as men aspired to become Osiris. So in life, men are Horus, and in death they become Osiris, and I suppose in life, women strive to be Hathor in death, and maybe Isis in life, which is an interesting, yeah, I could see that. Especially if you consider the story of the decapitation and the cow head growing in after. And the Greeks identified Hathor very closely with their Aphrodite, and Aphrodite sometimes is equivalent to Venus. And so that is bringing it all back around to astrology and where we can find understanding in astrology and the stars with these stories. Because remember, it's like, I could say to you that's just what I just told you in terms of the story of like, yeah, Horus cut off his mom's head out of anger because she didn't kill Set, and a cow's head grew there in its place, or they replaced it with a cow's head. What does that mean symbolically as opposed to like that actually happening, right? And so like when we think of even Zeus and Hera being brother and sister, and Isis and Osiris being brother and sister, as well as husband and wife, this is symbolic, right? Even in Japanese mythology, the marriage is, what is marriage? And because it's more than sex, although sex is part of it, the coupling to create something new from the two. And when I was studying the chakras, and I don't want anyone to get too attached to the word chakra because there's a lot of like new age baggage around it. Let's look at it as like a circular energy vortex that exists in your body. Chakra is just a word for it. You can call it whatever you'd like. Your body's energy centers and how that all reacts with each other based on if our body is also like as within, so without, mapping that to the greater world. So how these all interplay within us and how the greater world interplays is related. And the second chakra, which is like after the root chakra, which is the sacral chakra, is about water, and it's also orange, and it's about the two. And there's a really nice quote in there about how, like, you know, there's one and there's one. That's, you have that, but there's the and there's so much magic that happens in the and of one and one, and the uniqueness of that synastry between the two. So Shakti, and this, I like Shakti a lot because it's from Hindu Hindu religion, and in that religion they do a really nice job. They have a lot of stories that are very good at the multifaceted nature of things. And so this contradiction when it comes to different characters is resolved in it, and not resolved in it, but it's allowed to sit and take place in the same place, right? Like, you think about like physics, like matter cannot occupy the same space, but when we think of something above matter, then those rules do not apply. So Shakti means power in Hindu philosophy and theology, and understood to be the active dimension of the Godhead, the divine power that underlies the Godhead's ability to create the world and to display itself. Within the totality of the Godhead, Shakti is the complementary pole of the divine tendency towards quintessence, or quietness and stillness. It is quite common, furthermore, to identify Shakti with a female being, a goddess, and to identify the other pole with her male consort. The two poles are usually understood to be interdependent and to have relatively equal status in terms of the divine economy. And so the general definition of Shakti can refer to multiple ideas, but the general definition is that dynamic energy that is responsible for creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe. It is identified as female energy because Shakti is responsible for creation, as mothers are responsible for birth. And without Shakti, nothing in this universe would happen, as she simulates Siva, which is passive energy in the form of consciousness to create. So we do have a Hindu deity who is half male and half female, which is an iconic representation of that idea, and that illustrates that creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe is dependent on both forces interplaying with each other, which is why commonly these wife goddess energies are seen as twin energies to the male energy. Now, Shakti also refers to the manifestations of this energy, mainly goddesses. And some goddesses embody the destructive aspects of Shakti, such as death, degeneration, and illness, while other goddesses embody the creative and auspicious powers of Shakti, such as nature, the elements, music, art, dance, and prosperity. And Shakti may be personified as the gentle and benevolent Uma, the consort of Shiva, or Kali, the terrifying force destroying evil, or Durga, the warrior who conquers the forces that threaten the stability of the universe. So this Durga, the warrior who conquers the forces that threaten the stability of the universe. And Durga is really interesting too, because if you look at Viking culture, and bringing this back to what we were talking about with warrior goddesses such as Freya, Durga, the mother goddess, like there's a brown mother goddess in Viking culture way back, which is related to the Hindu Durga, mother goddess. So just interesting, that commonality there. And goddess worshippers often view their deity as the all-powerful supreme being, second not even to a male god. And there are enduring goddesses traditions all over India, especially in West Bengal and South India. Now, yes, so texts or contexts exalting the great goddess, however, usually affirm Shakti to be a power or the power underlying ultimate reality, or to be the ultimate reality itself. And instead of being understood as one of two poles, Shakti, as it applies to the Mahadevi, is identified as the essence of reality. So, the Hindu tradition also considers women the vessels of Shakti. The identification with Shakti acknowledges women as the vessels of both creative and destructive power. Like many modern cultures, Hindu culture has a hard time reconciling the biological compulsion of these two powerful forces. Some feminists and scholars criticize this identification because it leads women to be labeled as either saints or sinners, with little room in between. I think this goes back to the contradictions we see in the wife goddesses, like this idea that like there's death and then there's creation, and there's this jealousy, but there's also like protection. So what this is about, like, within ourselves, it's not like a duality, it's a battery of two sides, and it's really magnetism, really, if you think about how that two forces that are attracted to each other create power that is infinite. We've reached the end of Shakti as power feminine. I also do want, like, Shakti and Shiva are a divine couple that I love. They're eternally making love, and that is supposed to represent within us, if we take our masculine essence and our feminine essence and we're able to alchemize that within ourselves as the alchemical marriage, we can also then have roles where our lover, our husbands, are also enacting and being able to play that role on a higher level as well. So when you have sex in that context, it's like a whole other situation, which is amazing. I did want to share some images of Shakti before we wrap this edition of Warrior Goddess One Energy. Oh my gosh, I like pushed it all together. Speaking of convergence, of Warrior Goddess Wednesday with a focus on wife goddess energy. This. Let's do Shakti and Shiva. Yes, the eternal dance. Yeah, so that wife goddess energy, but not in a way that's like this like subservient kind of slave situation, but rather as like a true counterpoint to the masculine warrior energy, and that magical support, the magical backup that the warriors need, because women are also the as said here, this idea of earth, the playing ground, the stage by which the cosmic drama is set, where this is all taking place, like who, what, where, when, why, like that's the stage. And this is why also Saturn, you think of like matter, you think of 3D realm, but there's also a lot of beautiful things here that cannot be done in higher realms. So there's a lot of beauty to that, and I think it's up to us to take the parts that are a little bit more uncomfortable, such as death, destruction, and it can all be alchemized and synthesized to then create something out of it. What is that saying? You can't make an omelet without breaking a couple eggs. That kind of situation. I don't even know if that's the right way to use that saying right now, but that is all to say that as a wife and as someone who now works with goddess energy, and there are many goddess energies out there that you could choose to work with, and not all of them are benevolent. And just like I said before, like the contradictions that exist in all of us, and for us as women to also realize the great responsibility we have as conduits for that energy, and to start just having a little bit more care with it, and wielding that power in with grace, with humility, with compassion. And it's through our ability to dream that we're going to be able to bring back heroic male archetypes in our world. And I think that in our world right now, we are in sore need of what that is. So if you are interested in supporting the show, I have a little link. You can grab us a mushie to support, as well as the show is sponsored by Sacred Soma Alchemy. We also are having a lot more virtual online programming available online for you to upgrade your Earth avatar with a bit of a cosmic astrological spin to it as well, because as I said, we're living out our existence in a 3-dimensional world. And although we are infinite divine beings, we owe it to ourselves to have this mech suit in high operating order so that we will be able to fulfill all of the goals that we want to fulfill in our lifetime. So without further ado, I hope you found this session of Warrior Goddess Wednesday super informative. Please give me a like, share, and subscribe if you found any of this entertaining or informative. And I hope that you have a wonderful day wherever you reside in the cosmos. So, without further ado, I will catch all of you in the next video. Have a beautiful day wherever you are. Bye.